I can see all of you pretty well.
Is that good?
We can see you here.
Is it my mother there?
Your mother is here. Watch what you say.
He said, is that my mother? Yeah. He's laughing.
Are we ready to
We're
start?
ready. You want to, we're going to have Vi say a few words to start us off.
Hi, Ron.
Okay, great.
Hi.
Hi there, hi.
Oh, this is wonderful. We're so happy that you're doing this, and thank you. And thank you, those of you who are here. And is it all? Are we all hearing okay?
Yes.
Right? Okay. Okay. So first of all, the intro. Ron Charles writes.
Is your mic on?
It's on. Is it on back there?
It's not coming through
No.
the mic.
Okay. Wait, we'll get 1 minute. Oh, thank you, Mary. While we're doing that, phones, remember, please, everybody turn your phone off. Okay, can you hear now?
Which mic are you?
I'm on, sorry, I'm using, I don't know, but it's the other one, I guess. How about that? There we go. Okay, now we're in business. So we'll start over and say thank you for coming today. And thanks especially also to our dear friend, Sandy Charles, Ron's mom, who was the one who enticed him to come and make this possible. So, Mr. Charles writes about books for the Washington Post and CBS Sunday Morning. He is a native of St. Louis who earned a master's degree at Washington University and taught English at the John Burroughs School. He has won honors from the National Book Critics Circle and the American Library Association and the Society for Features Journalism. In 2014, he served on the fiction jury for the Pulitzer Prize. Ron and his wife Dawn, a high school English teacher, live in Bethesda, Maryland. So Ron's in, looks like his dining area, kitchen area in Bethesda, and here we are trying something new. So, welcome, Ron. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll take that as a yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm not getting any feedback from you all at the moment. Vi asked me to just talk about my job as a book reviewer. So I'll do that for a while, and then I'd be happy to take any questions you all might have about my work. I was teaching English at John Burroughs and loved it. It's a fabulous school, but I was really tired of grading papers. And so the mother of a student suggested that I review books. So I went to Library Limited, remember that huge bookstore in Clayton?
Yes.
And I just looked at the new book shelf and picked up a book, took it home, read it, reviewed it, and sent it off to the Christian Science Monitor in Boston, and they bought it. That was about 25 years ago. And I kept doing that. I kept buying books and reading them and reviewing them and mailing them off, and sometimes they would buy them, sometimes they wouldn't. Eventually, my editor moved on, and I asked if I could join the staff as a regular editor. And so we went up to Boston and had a great run there. My wife got a job teaching English, and my kids went to school in the Boston area. I stayed there about 7 years. When it looked like it was time to move on, I applied to a lot of book sections around the country, all of which were closing at the time. It was a really grim period for newspapers and particularly newspaper book sections. I applied to the Washington Post. They did not answer me, and nobody else said yes. And so I gave up for a while, and then 6 months later, I just sent all my papers again to the Washington Post, and this time they did hire me. So I don't know what was going on there. But anyhow, I've been here almost 20 years now. It's been a lot of changes through that time. The Grahams, who owned the paper for so many years, sold it, of course. And the book section got very, very, very small. It was just down to me and a couple other people for a while. And then a few months ago, we decided to expand the book section considerably. We got a new editor, hired a bunch of new people, new critics, new news writer. So we're as big as, I think almost as big as we've ever been now at the Washington Post for the book section. They reinstated the section in the Sunday paper. I think I have one here. big 8-page section every Sunday. We also publish more reviews online, and it's been very fun. I now write a column. I'm in the paper every Sunday. I review a book every Sunday, and I write a column every Friday. And once a month, as Vi said, I recommend books for CBS Sunday Morning, which we film right here in the dining room. But it took a long time to work out that relationship between the Post and CBS. And just as we were about ready to film the first episode, the pandemic began, and so we were going to shut it all down. And it seemed like they'd done so much work to set it up that I said, well, you know, I have all the equipment, I have all the lights and camera, my wife knows how to use that, so why don't we just film it in my living room? So that was an answer, because there was a lot of trouble getting to studios at that time, you know, when everything was closed. And so we've just kept doing that every month now for, I think, for 3 years. So my wife's upstairs now grading papers, which is what she's almost always doing. Reviewing books has been fun, and it's not so much. It turns out it's not so different than teaching English. Every month, every week, I try to convince people that they would enjoy reading this book, which is pretty much what I was trying to do as an English teacher, too. I have about 3 or 4 days to read the book. They send me advanced copies. Those are copies that come out about 4 months before the book itself. And I read it with great attention on the subway to and from work and at my office, and I take lots of notes because I can't remember anything anymore. And then every Monday I write up about 1,000 words. I let it sit for a week. I turn it in on the next Monday morning. My editor goes over it with comments, corrections, things he wants me to fix, that sort of thing. I always agree to all those suggestions, and then it goes up online on Tuesday morning, and then the next Sunday it goes into the paper. Oh, also in that process, there's an interesting step now where an artist comes in and talks to me about the book and the review and starts to design what sort of illustration they're going to do for the review. So that's been very fun over the last 6 months or so. Sometimes we farm those out, sometimes it's an artist on staff. We are getting about 150 books a day at the Post now, which is a lot of books. There's a woman, an office manager, whose job it is to organize all those things, open them, sort them. Most of them are not things we're interested in, but many of them are. And she lets us all know on the staff what's coming in, these are books that aren't going to be out for 4 or 5 months. And we try to plan our coverage there, try to find reviewers. It's either our new nonfiction critic or me, or thousands of freelancers around the world that get these assignments. And we send them those early copies. It's not very lucrative work. It's not anything anyone would do for the money, I'm afraid. But people are eager to do it, typically. They read the books, they send in their reviews, they get edited by us, and then they get sent back. Sometimes that's a very laborious process if the review is not very good. I don't edit anymore, fortunately, but I did for many, many years. And then if we get them to sign off on the review, then we post it online, and then it goes into the paper, either the daily or the Sunday paper. Choosing the books is hard. I know you probably have trouble when you go into a bookstore or into the library figuring out what you want to read. It's that times 1,000 for me, because the books are just pouring in, and typically no one else has read them. And we have to try and decide what we are going to talk about, what we're going to review. Now, at this point in my career, I'm mostly just reviewing books by big authors, famous authors, so it's a little easier than it used to be. But I also like to mix it up and make sure that I'm reviewing some new people, and that's just kind of a guess sometimes. We do get advanced reviews from trade journals like Publishers Weekly or Kirkus or Library Journal. Those are kind of helpful to let us know what the book's about, but it still is kind of a risk. We can't read all the books and then decide which ones we'd like to review. We just pretty much have to commit. Now that the audience for the audience for the Post is quite large. About 100 million people a month read the Post around the world now. So we know we've got this enormous, very diverse audience, all different kinds of people. So we're trying to do about 20 to 25 books a week that reflect a lot of different tastes, a lot of different values, a lot of different interests, nonfiction and fiction, poetry some, a few children's books, but not that many. A lot of political books, as you might imagine, at the Washington Post, a lot of history books because of who we are and what people want from us. But mostly I'm looking for books to recommend because I think that's what people want. They want to know what to read next. Nobody's ever asked me about books I didn't like. They mostly want recommendations. So I do try to pick books that I think I'm going to like. It's hard though because, it's a 400-page book and I have 3 days to read it. And if I discover halfway through that I don't like it, I cannot stop and begin another book because I don't have time. So I pretty much have to plow on. My approach to book reviewing is to try to understand what the author wanted to do, what they were trying to accomplish, what kind of book this is, and then critique the book according to how well the author accomplished those goals. I'm not particularly interested in whether I liked the book or whether I thought it was boring or not. That's too personal. I want to judge the book on its own terms. That doesn't mean I won't write some negative reviews now and then. Some books are not good. Some books either don't have very lofty goals or they did not accomplish them. And I have to say that once in a while. I had to say that today, for instance, about somebody who's an author whose books I love, but this book is no good. And that's a terrible, terrible feeling. So I'm glad to be over that. See what else I can, I took a few notes here. People often ask me what it was like to be a judge for the Pulitzer Prize. I had no idea what I was getting into. You get asked. I think they give you $1,000, maybe it's $2,000, not enough. And then a few months later, the books begin to arrive. We got about 450 books. There was so many books that some days my wife and I would get home, and the two of us had to take each end of a box and move it slowly into the house. Completely took over the living room. We had to get new bookshelves. We had to clear out a room of the house. It was a really house-changing experience to be a judge for that contest. I'd done other contests too, but this was by far the most books. I did not read all the books to the end. I read until I was sure that book was not the best of the year. Sometimes it takes very few pages to know that. It turns out that anybody can submit his book or her book for a Pulitzer Prize. You just need to have $100. And it turns out that a lot of people have $100. Or they used to. I was surprised by the number of self-published books we got. Books that did not stand a chance, and I felt bad that someone had spent $100, sending in a book with like a hand-drawn unicorn with Jesus on top or something. It's just ridiculous stuff. But we did narrow it down. We met on Zoom, and I liked the other two. There were two other judges. I liked them very much. I'd known one of them for years. And we would talk about what we liked, what we recommended. We would get the list down pretty quickly to about 50 books, then about 20 books. I think we got down to about 8, and then they brought us up to New York, and they put us in a room, and they brought us bagels and things, and said you can't leave until you get it down to 3 books. It was a very cordial, very fun discussion. I've heard of other judges. It was a disaster, and people were very contentious, but ours was not that way at all. We all pretty much liked the same kind of books, which was fortunate, and the discussion was very pleasant and interesting. We got it down to 3 books, and then we told the Pulitzer Board what they were, and then you just go home and you wait. You don't know who the winner of the prize is. You hear it on the radio or on the internet like everybody else. And I was delighted. Some years the board decides not to give a prize, and so all your work through the year was for nothing. That seems like a horrible fate to befall any judge. but I had a very positive experience. So, what else could I say? What else would be of interest? Do you all have any? Is there a microphone there? Can I take questions about my work from you all?
Yes, indeed. Anybody have a question? I'll run around with the microphone for you. Well, I know my husband started a list. Can you read here where it's kind of dark? I had him write down a few. And now, Ron, you do know my husband, the kind of books he reads and likes, so be ready if you can get his glasses going.
Well, a bunch of topics, okay. A bunch of topics, and none of them are profound. They all deal with what's happening in the world. No need to, well, I have the microphone. Okay. Well, I can move over here. Basically, these are just topics. The best analysis of technology in the current world, the forecast of changes in Europe. What do you think about Putin? Future democracy in the U.S., U.S. in, I can't read this writing. Anyway, a bunch of topics, nothing profound, but just what do you think are the interesting things that are happening in literature today?
Well, not interesting, but the most alarming thing happening in publishing now is a rash of book banning across the country. I've reported on this for almost 2 years now. It is extraordinary, the number of books that are being banned, particularly in Texas and Florida. Those are the two most rabid book banning states at the moment. Certain conservative politicians have discovered that this is a great issue to get people excited in the culture wars. And so they started going after librarians and school teachers, even bookstores, and even publishers in some cases, claiming that they're corrupting children, that they're grooming children for sexual abuse, all kinds of really base and horrible accusations. They threatened to jail teachers and jail librarians. Teachers in Florida are so afraid now of being prosecuted that they're cleaning out their classrooms of books. So there are no more classroom libraries anymore because they don't know when some crazy politician is going to come after them or some wacky parent with some right-wing group is going to attack them. This is a really, really troubling sort of pre-fascist movement across the country that is extremely disturbing. Some states are passing laws now going after publishers and the kind of books that they sell to schools. They're making schools and publishers rate their books according to some vague scale that they've created. And if they don't do it right, they can be prosecuted. They can be barred from ever selling books. This is just way, way out of control. And I honestly don't know where it's going to end. Most people, Republicans and Democrats, are against book banning. They say they don't like this. They wish politicians would stop doing it. But there is this, hard, rabid, Trumpy group of voters who get really excited about this. And so some very cynical politicians keep using it as a wedge issue. And it is so, so destructive, both to our schools and our libraries and our culture.
Okay, thank you, and I'm sorry, I was reminded that you review fiction, so I'm sorry, a little behind. Are there some other questions that someone would like to ask of Ron? Here we go.
Well, this is not about fiction, but do you have a favorite historian?
Favorite historian? That is way off my subject of expertise. John Meacham, I'd say, is my favorite, the presidential historian. I've heard him speak many times. He's very, very funny and charming. And his presidential biographies, he's won the Pulitzer Prize twice, so this is not a very daring choice. But he's a great one to check out.
Anybody, I actually have a question myself, and I bet we all would like to know, is there a one book fiction that you'd say, don't ever miss that, reading that book? Don't miss reading? Couldn't you live it? What would be 1, 2, 3?
How about 5?
5.
Yeah. That's hard. One book, greatest book. I think the greatest book in my lifetime was Toni Morrison's Beloved, but that's a very heavy book. The 2 Pulitzer Prize winners that were announced in April are both really good. One is by Barbara Kingsolver called Demon Copperhead. That's a wonderful book. The other one's called Trust by Hernan Diaz. It's a very different book. It's about a financier around the Depression. I just read a very charming historical novel about India called Loot by Tanya James. Apparently, 200 years ago, a sultan in India had this, well, it's not a robot because they didn't have electricity, but it was like a machine made out of wood that looked like a tiger attacking. This actually exists. It's in a museum in London now. And so she wrote this really lovely novel called Loot about how this wooden robot or automaton was created. That just came out this week. It's very, very charming. I really do find books pretty often that I think are wonderful. A book called, one of my favorites last year was Still Life by Sarah Winman. It's about, during the Second World War, many museums were destroyed, and the Nazis were stealing a lot of art from around Europe and bringing it back to Germany. This novel is about special forces that were sent out to track down that art and protect it and to retrieve it, and some other people that swirled around that world. Very, very charming book called Still Life by Sarah Winman.
Any other questions? I see one back here.
This is kind of a general question, but something's been on my mind recently, and I don't know if you can answer this, but hello. I've, on the radio, heard very poor grammar used by people on the radio. Do you find that same situation in the books, that they don't know how to use the proper tense or to spell the proper word, like T-H-E-I-R, T-H-E-R-E, or whatever? So I'm just curious how far that's gone.
Well, I think you should be patient with people on the radio, because after all, they're just typically speaking extemporaneously, so it's easy to slip up when you're speaking. But when you're writing, of course, particularly a book, where it's been gone over by so many different people and editors, it should be relatively error-free. I'm a terrible speller, which is a cross to bear as an English teacher and then an editor and now a writer. So I'm maybe more understanding of spelling errors. And my grammar's pretty good, although my just yesterday my editor caught another lay lie mistake I made, which I will never get right. You would be surprised. I mean, when I was editing, and I was an editor for 20 years or so, and I would see raw copy submitted to us by some of the greatest living writers in the world, and sometimes it was terrible. It was really surprising that what you see in a book or in a newspaper or in a magazine has been formed and rewritten and smoothed and corrected by this enormous army of people that never get named and never get any credit, and just working behind the scenes. We have some very, very good reporters who are not very good stylists, but they get the story, they get the quotes, they get the information, and then this other group of editors come along and shape it into stories that you read. That's not the case with everyone, of course. Many of the reporters are gorgeous writers, but it is always a group effort. I mean, you think of writing as being such a solitary thing, but it's not. Even the conception of the story is often taking place with agents and editors. Then the manuscript is written, then it's sent to an agent who goes over it, then it's sent to an editor who goes over it, maybe 2 editors. So by the time you're reading something in a book or a magazine, there's only one byline typically, but it's always a group effort. And I would hope that it's relatively error-free. The problem, of course, I'm sure you've noticed, even there in St. Louis, is that there's no money in journalism. And the staff just keeps getting smaller and smaller. And after they fire the book critics, they fire the copy editors. And so there just isn't the kind of support staff there used to be at newspapers and magazines to proofread the way they used to do it. And this will all change even more over the next few years as computers start to do it more and more with artificial intelligence, and ChatGPT, and maybe that'll be better, but you might see strange errors now. I mean, you won't see misspellings. You'll see like really weird things that only a computer would miss, where no person has actually read this. So I don't know what the future of copy editing will be like. We might see error-free prose, or we might see prose that just is kind of computer-generated gibberish.
I have to throw this in, and I know I should not do this, but man, you are your father reincarnated. See, and that's a good thing. No.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I know. I have a question. In all the reviewing you've done of others' works, is there a Ron Charles book that you ever dream about writing yourself?
A few years ago, I did try, mostly as an experiment to see, what is it these people go through, and it was harder than I thought, and harder in ways I did not expect. It was very hard to get people to move around, for instance. People were always just kind of settling in. It was very hard to have a plot. So I did not finish that manuscript. And of course, most film critics are not film producers, and most theater critics are not actors. So it's not that unusual for book critics to not have written their own novels, but a lot of them have, of course. The trouble is, I go into the office and I see a pile of books larger than any pile you've ever seen, with 150 more books coming in every day, and most of them are mediocre. And I think the world does not really need me to write another mediocre book to add to that pile. And so I've just not, I've not generated the enthusiasm for that kind of a project. I write essentially a novel every year. I write 200,000 words a year, which is a long novel. So, add that up. That's 20 novels worth of writing out there. That's more than enough.
We have another question here, Ron.
Yes, I use Goodreads, the website, for help in selecting books. Read a lot of new books and new authors. What do you think of their work?
I have used Goodreads for years, maybe not since it started, but pretty close to since it started. I keep track of all my reviews there. I include links to my reviews there. That is the best online way to organize my books that I know of. I know there are a few other, maybe many other websites that do that, but that's by far the biggest one. So I think it's good. I think it skews heavily towards fiction. It's particularly good for romance, which is not an interest of mine, but I know it has an enormous romance community. I don't think the ratings are very helpful. They all seem to be about the same. Every book is it's like your Uber rating. They're all sort of converging around 4. So I don't think that's very useful, but the comments people make, I think, are quite useful. And, as much as we complain about the decline of book criticism and book reviews and newspapers going out of business, there are more book reviews available now than ever before because of Goodreads and Amazon, where a lot of amateur people sit down and write, I think, often surprisingly good commentary on the books that they've read. And I think it's great that there's that sort of democracy of criticism out there. Bookreads is now owned by Amazon, whose founder, Jeff Bezos, owns the Washington Post.
Were there any other questions? Did I
I'm supposed to include that disclaimer whenever I talk about things.
didn't see. Were there any other questions? No? Mama? Yeah, okay. Excuse me. Here we
This
go.
doesn't seem fair.
You know we couldn't get by without your mom saying something, right?
Oh,
Can you tell them a little bit about how you write the weekly column, the Washington Post Book Club?
Oh, yes, thanks. Every Friday we send out a newsletter over email called the Book Club, which is a series of reflections on different things happening that week in the publishing industry, about 9 or 10 items. It always starts with something political, then it gets a little cultural, then there'll be some weird things, you know, wacky things that I've noticed around the internet. Then it ends with a poem and some reflection on my life. It's become an enormous project. When they asked me to do it, I'd never heard of an email newsletter. It sounded very old-fashioned, and I was very suspicious of that as a project. But it's far and away the most successful, popular thing I do. I mean, there's no comparison to anything else I do. Hundreds of thousands of people read it or get it every week, and I have a journal that I'm constantly collecting ideas for. Each week I interview people and I write little 400-word stories about different things for this newsletter. For instance, I'll be if I can actually go to it and tell you what's coming up. So this Friday, for instance, somebody in Maine has started a new nonprofit that combines exercise for kids with trying to get them to read more. These are particularly very poor children who do not have access to books, so I'll interview her. Elizabeth Gilbert, if you know her, she's the author of Eat, Pray, Love. She announced yesterday that she's canceling her upcoming book because it's set in Russia, and now that Russia is at war with Ukraine, she doesn't think she should publish a book about Russia. I'll write about that. A group in Florida has started a bookmobile of banned books. There's a first edition of Harry Potter is going for sale for $140,000. Yeah. So I wish I'd kept mine. Did not. No, nobody did. The new archivist of the Donald Trump Presidential Library. I didn't even know there was such a person. He exists here in DC. I'm trying to get an interview with him. He's already turned me down once, but I will not rest. What else we got? Oh, it's Bloomsday. It's the day that Ulysses takes place, so I'll write about that. That's an annual literary, James Joyce Ulysses novel. I'll write about that. I'll run through a bunch of literary prizes that were given out this week. This week is also the 75th anniversary of Shirley Jackson's famous short story, The Lottery, which is the most, when the New Yorker published that story 75 years ago, they received more mail than they have ever received before, most of it very negative. So that's a little preview of what's coming up in the newsletter this Friday. It's just always a grab bag of whatever the week brings. Some of the stories work out, but some by Thursday afternoon don't. They have to be cut, and I'll sub in some others. So it's like a little books magazine. It comes in your email every Friday.
How do we get it? Yeah.
It's free. You don't have to subscribe to the Washington Post. How do you get it? I should know the answer to this. It's on. There's a link at the bottom of my email, so I know that Vi has it, my mother has it, and I'd be happy to give that link to anyone who writes to me, or I can help send it to somebody who can give it to all of you if you'd like. we'll work this out.
Send it to, I don't see that, send it to me again if you would, Ron, and I'll give it to Beth or Nancy, and they can take care of getting it out for those who.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That would be really great. Are there any other questions for Ron at this point? So then, I don't want to be in the way of everybody, but I think this is the time we say goodbye. It's been so nice, Ron. We so appreciate having you do this. Oh, thank you so much for taking the time out of what I know is a very busy schedule, and we're happy that you were with us. And we're also happy that it worked to Zoom.
Yes, I was happy too. I'm glad we had that rehearsal though.
Yeah. Okay, and our best to Dawn, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
I think, oh, did we miss one?
I think that was a wonderful try. Yeah. And I would like to see more of that. That was great. And you know, as the Zoom program come up, I thought it worked really well.
All right.
I really enjoyed it.
All right, well, it was